Welcome back, everybody. We're in January. It's college football playoff season. It's NFL playoff season. This is Breaking Bet here with your guy, Johnny VTV, laying it down on the mic as the host. And I got my guy, Eric Pauly, a.k.a. Slime Action, in here with me, as always, to help me handicap this fantastic board that is Wild Card Weekend that we have. Eric, my friend, I'm glad you can be here. As always, we got a great weekend of football ahead.
Dude, it's exciting. Wild Card Weekend has quickly become one of the best weekends of football of all. There's only so many weekends of football, and this one sits close to the top. Obviously, adding college in as well makes it even better. But the streaks that the underdogs have been on, dogs have been covering on historical rates on Wild Card Weekend. Some fun matchups and some teams and some games that I think are set up for higher scoring environments. So we should definitely be in for one of the best weekends of football of the year, I think.
Yeah, it's fun because anybody, if you've taken a look at the schedule, you can clearly see you have Penn State, Notre Dame tonight. You have Texas, Ohio State tomorrow. You have 2 games on Saturday for the NFL. You have 3 games on Sunday, and you have 1 game on Monday. Obviously, Rams, Vikings, prayers go out to everybody in California suffering with the crazy fires. That game, the location's in jeopardy. There is a contingency plan. To be honest, I don't know if there's been an update, but if they can't play the game in LA on Monday night between the Vikings and the Rams, the NFL has come out and said that they will be going to play at the home of the Arizona Cardinals in Glendale, Arizona. Obviously, that would really hurt the Rams if they don't truly have the home field advantage. But
we have home field advantage there anyway.
But, hey, come on, they're not the Chargers. They got a home field advantage.
They're still on the lower end, but I feel you. It's not the end of the world.
They to decide, but there's a lot of action this weekend. And before we get to it, typically what we do, if you haven't seen the show, if you have, then you know. But before we get into the actual rundown of the games, I personally like to ask Eric, what are you expecting most? What's your favorite look for week X? Now, obviously, I want to do something a little bit different because you mentioned upsets and you mentioned underdogs covering at a crazy clip in the Wild Card Weekend. So let that be the segue into this question, E. What favorite is most likely to get upset in the wild card round?
So I think there's one, like, so the Vikings are favorites, but they're very short favorites. So the shortest of it, though, Houston's only 2.5, 3, depending where you look. Obviously, you have some big spreads. Then Tampa's a 3-point spread. I think the most likely to get upset is I have 3 in mind that I'm targeting. If the other ones would get upset, I'd be more surprised by those things. But I think if I have to put on the record, I think the Chargers are the most likely to get upset in the wild card round.
Interesting. I would probably rank the Chargers as my second most likely. And that's actually obviously the first game of this playoff weekend. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But I'm going to bookend it. I'm going to say the Vikings are the most likely to get upset.
They're my 2.
Obviously, the Vikings right now, it's been teetering small numbers, anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 for the last 4 plus days. And obviously now we have to see what the situation if this game is going to indeed be in LA. But we'll cover why I think the Vikings are probably the most likely team to be upset. Where, just out of curiosity, where would you rank the Eagles-Packers game and the Tampa Bay-Washington game in terms of the upset scale?
Tampa Bay-Washington 3. Obviously, we'll talk about that game in more detail. And yes, there is a little bit of bias there, but I'll break that all down shortly. And I do not have the Eagles. The Eagles it's probably Ravens-Eagles are my 2 least likely to get upset.
Fair enough. Let us get into the first game, which is the Chargers as a small 2.5-point favorite at the Houston Texans. Eric, I'll let you kick this one off. Just before we get into this, side note here, if you've been paying attention at all to the NFL, and the Houston Texans these last 6+ weeks, you've noticed that this team is not only a far cry to that preseason Super Bowl team, CJ Stroud MVP hype, a team that's not even come close to those expectations, but they've been floundering. They have not looked good in a long time. So give me your take on this game.
Yeah, so I took the 3. I bet it. I haven't bet the money line. I bet the money line in the stupid money line parlay where I have all my projected winners, which I guess I'll definitely, give out to the boys during the show. But starts with Houston money line, starts with Houston +3. Now, if you've been a follower of the show, first off, we appreciate the hell out of you. Second off, that in the summer I was very pro Houston. Obviously, as the season progressed, have to change your opinion when presented with new information. So obviously, quickly got off the bandwagon and recognized them for what they are, a very mediocre team. But this Chargers team, Johnny, I just think that they're also like beyond overrated. Now they definitely have the coaching edge. They obviously have the quarterback edge, but their offense, they have Dobbins back, which is obviously huge. But I know there was an illness going around for like Quentin Johnston, like that's something they're concerned. And like outside of Ladd, really, like they don't have an explosive offense. And Houston's defense is good. It's battle tested. It's played some, tough opponents. I know they got smoked by the Ravens, but that was a terrible scheduling situation. They played the Chiefs pretty well until Tank Dell went down. They've defense is the name of the game. Have they been winning games? And I think they're more capable of shutting down or slowing down, I should say, Herbert, because Herbert's obviously an animal, is the better quarterback. And then the Chargers, they played nobody good. They play, playoff teams, and they look, mortal. And obviously Houston is one of the worst teams in the playoffs, probably the worst team from a power rating perspective. But I don't think that they're like, it's kind of like, I think they're in like the Bengals tier where like, yes, I think the Bengals are better, though they're not in the playoffs. I just mean that in the sense where like, they're fringe playoff teams. Like, and that's when the Chargers are really taking a step up in class. They played some really bad quarterbacks this year. And just from a ratings perspective, they were laying 3 points in Kansas City. The Chiefs were laying 3 against the Texans. And now at home, the Chargers are laying 3. It seems like a little much. And then I think the Texans and the teaser is obviously awesome. And I took the 3.
Okay. As we often do on this program, I am going to go the other way. And listen, I think Houston's roster on paper, even with the injuries they've suffered to the wide receiver position with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, may be better overall. As you said, their defense is very good. They have a lot of playmakers. Offensively, they still have playmakers. Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, John Mechie can show up. Joe Mixon's been a horse this year, and CJ Stroud. My problem is Houston has not played well at all recently. They're going to the season much like the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's been bad. Even the wins that they've had. One of the wins they had was against the Jacksonville Jaguars by 3 points. They have not been playing good football. I obviously, considering that they're not fully healthy right now, is an issue for me. But here's what it comes down to for me. Because I think the roster-wise, it's very similar, right? I think defensively, it's, maybe you give a little bit of an edge to Houston. But even though the Chargers defense, in my opinion, isn't as good as what it's presented on paper throughout the season, I still think it's in that sort of same tier as what Houston's presented defensively. Wide receiver-wise, now it's just pretty much Nico Collins as the main focal point. Quentin Johnston's coming off a career performance. He put up, what did he put up? Over 160 yards, like 13 catches last week. You have Ladd McConkey, who is developing into a star wide receiver. He's on an absolute heater to close out the season. But really, why I like the Chargers, 2 reasons. Number one, Jim Harbaugh. What he's done to turn this program around after a few-year absence from the playoffs, coming off winning a title at Michigan, coming straight into the NFL, a team that, I got to be honest, I didn't really think the Chargers were going to be that good. I didn't love their roster coming into the season. Look at what he's done. He's turned them into a playoff team. He's got Justin Herbert playing probably the best football he's ever played, even if his stats don't reflect, the once upon a time 5,000-yard passer that he was. The coaching advantage to me over DeMeco Ryans is huge. This is a guy who went to 3 straight NFC championship games in the early 2010s. He knows what it takes to coach in these big playoff games. That's number one. Number two, Justin Herbert being the more seasoned quarterback, a guy who, in my opinion, I'd still put him as a top 5 quarterback. I know stats throw a lot of people, and that's what everybody lives and dies by. But if you've watched Herbert, you heard what I just said. This is probably the best he's ever played. Even if his numbers don't jump off the screen, he was still great this year. And he did things that don't show up on the box score. The last time he was in a playoff game, he had a 4-possession lead over the Jacksonville Jaguars. By the way, I had the Chargers to win the Super Bowl preseason that year, and they choked. That was his last memory in the playoffs. I think he's going to come ready and correct to right the ship. I'm taking Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh over C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans in this big playoff spot.
So you can call it maybe, I guess, a hedge of sorts, but I'm not sitting here saying like best bet. Like I'm throwing a unit on this game because I do see an edge, but I do agree with you that we'll know very early on who's winning this bet in this game because you'll clearly see the coaching edge and the quarterback edge. Like laying 2.5 points by betting on, the clearly superior coach and quarterback combination, like you're never going to get like a major disagreement from me. Like I think getting 3 points here is a little much because of everything I laid out before. But that being said, if the argument back is just like better coach, better quarterback, like, yeah, that normally works out most of the time.
Quick thought on the total here, between 41.5, 42.5. You expecting this to stay under? For two teams with playmakers, it's a low total.
I think it's going to be around the number. Like, I don't think it's going to be a game that's, closing 42, ending with a final score of 51. But I think I do lean over, and I could see like a 44, 47 point game. Yes.
Obviously, I could see a lot of points here. I don't have a strong lean. I'm probably not going to play it, but just looking at it and in my research, my handicap, I'd probably lean under. I could see Houston contributing to the under here, which would go in hand with the fact that I think the Chargers win. To be honest, the 2.5 on FanDuel, you're laying 120 compared to a minus 152 money line, whereas on DraftKings, for instance, it's a 3-point line. Obviously, the huge key number, the half a point, the hook, is gigantic, and that's why you're only paying $1.05 for that 3. I mean, I'd probably just bag it and lay the money with the Chargers. Especially if you think it's going to be a lower scoring game. 2.5, man. Every 2.5, I feel like that I've seen this year, there's always some weird thing that happens. Somebody misses an extra point, or they go for 2 and they don't get it, and it kind of throws the whole scoring out of whack. So I think instead of even laying the 2.5, I would probably just take the money line for me for the LA Chargers.
Yeah, I can't blame you, honestly.
All right, a game that is the biggest spread of the weekend is the 3 match between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you have not heard the news, Baltimore wide receiver Zay Flowers, who got hurt last week in Cleveland or against Cleveland, will not play in this game. Nonetheless, it's not going to affect the line that much because Zay Flowers is not Lamar Jackson. He is not Derrick Henry. 9.5 points. And I understand the Ravens, who are one of the hottest teams in football right now. I understand how well they've been playing, and it just seems like right now they're gelling. Everything is clicking. Am I crazy to think that this is just too big of a number against a divisional opponent? Two teams that know each other so well. Am I nuts to think that this is just too big of a number?
No, not at all. So here's the thing, right? Like the Steelers, as we know, since really Roethlisberger retired and Mike Tomlin's been going through this carousel of offensive coordinators and quarterbacks, like some weird fluky shit was going to happen for the Steelers that were going to keep them in games, especially when it came to divisional games, as we've seen, especially against the Baltimore Ravens. So, like from a numbers perspective, like no, the Steelers stink. Like they're not a good football team. The Ravens are definitely probably around 9 points better than they are at home, but I feel like the last couple of weeks, we've been kind of waiting to see like what, magical thing is going to happen for the Steelers to have them, somehow pull off a win. It kind of hasn't happened. And then if you think about all the crazy things that have happened for Tomlin, like it kind of just seems like the regression is kind of finally hitting. So like, I don't know if like the Tomlin voodoo is good enough to make this team, play like a prototypical Mike Tomlin division underdog, especially in the playoffs, considering the defense is, having this finger pointing fight that they've been going on for a couple of weeks. Players not playing. They were, talking into the media about like the dysfunction there. So like that clearly exists. Russell Wilson stinks. Their offensive line stinks. And George Pickens is one of the, most erratic kind of guys. When he's good, he's amazing. When he's off, it's not just off on the field, it's off clearly everywhere. So it might be a spot where, at this point, it might be a team like the Texans at 2, Johnny, that are just too far gone. They've lost 4 straight. They played like shit. They're talking shit. Like, yeah, is it the potential Mike Tomlin gets them going for this massive third game, a team they've already beaten the playoff spot, and 9.5 is ridiculous? Absolutely. But it also could just be like, maybe the wheels are finally coming off, and it seems like they potentially could be, and the Ravens are an absolute wagon. So long way to say, like, I don't have a strong opinion, obviously, but you're either betting on Tomlin reuniting the ship and like doing what Tomlin does, or you're betting on kind of all that shit being finally, pushed to the wayside because there's just too much not good, mediocre football going on in Pittsburgh.
And, the thing is, obviously, Pittsburgh won the first game in the middle of the season. And more recently, the Steelers on a 4-game losing streak. I mean, it's been a gauntlet. They were at Philly, at Baltimore, home to KC on Christmas, and home to Cincinnati. But that game against the Ravens, you're going to look at it on paper and be like, yeah, they lost by 17. They got blown out. But if you remember that game, that was a close game. In the second quarter, the Steelers were going in. Russell Wilson on the scramble was a great scramble, but he forgot to cover up the ball. Like right at the goal line, he fumbled. And he fumbled. They lost possession, and that game got out of hand from there. So if that doesn't happen, it's a 14-7 game. Who knows? Who knows how it goes from there? But these two teams, I feel like, always play each other and tough. And, that kind of game, the way they lost that game, I feel like, especially against Baltimore, it's sticking in their craw that, like, all right, well, we can't lose to these guys again. And in that sense, I feel like this game is going to end up being a lot closer than it is. George Pickens coming off the worst game as a pro. And as you said it, he's a high variance player. He's erratic. When he wants to show up and he plays like he's capable of playing, he can take over a game. That guy who had 4 drops against Cincinnati, a couple big ones that could have ended up winning them the game. Does this guy say, hey, listen, I had my worst game. I'm going to come back stronger. I'm going to take it to Baltimore secondary. I'm probably going to draw a lot of Marlon Humphrey. I'm coming back. Does Russell Wilson finally get his head out of his ass and he start playing football? I don't have a strong opinion on this game at the moment. Early lean here, 7:18 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, January 9th. I would side with the Steelers taking the 9.5 just because it is an extraordinary number. Also would probably consider taking the 15.5 in a teaser. If I'm laying a teaser, I'd probably take the 15.5 with the Steelers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't hate on it. I would, if you have a 10-point teaser and this gets to 10, I would even at the half, like we've talked about, if you want to like have some fun, throw some cash around and have multiple games of action, I would just take it with Baltimore. Though, if you were getting, 19.5 for Pittsburgh, you'd probably like to see that. Nothing strong for me here in terms of props. I've dug around. I kind of like Najee receiving yards. It's 9.5. Warren is definitely like the major, third down back, and he has been taking, over for that. But Baltimore really is poor against running backs, and that they love to give, Najee the football. And I think Baltimore's like 28th in receiving yards to running backs or something like that. So that's a prop I'm looking at. Saquon touchdown in like every parlay I have. I'm definitely gonna. I'm not Saquon, Derrick Henry, of course, even at minus 180 as a little, parlay piece. I'm definitely going to be all over that in some of my slips. And I was looking at for the Steelers too, bro. Like I was looking at Russell Wilson rush yards also. I don't know if you was looking at that. I was looking at that because his numbers I feel like are suppressed from the beginning of the season when he came back from the injury. And now that he's healthier, these games literally mean everything. Like we know how bad Steelers O-line is. Like I think 14.5, I think it was, bro. Like, seems a little low.
Does seem a little low, doesn't it? I mean, I was actually thinking that myself. Another thing I was actually thinking about that I might like better is taking the Steelers first half getting 6.5. I feel like Pittsburgh could come out with more sense of urgency. Do everything they can to stop Derrick Henry, especially in that first half. And we know Henry is a closer, and as the game goes on, as the defense wears down, that's where he's at his best historically in his career. So getting 6.5 in the first half is something I would also really consider. I think that'd probably, be one of the better bets in terms of the line in this game for me.
Mm-hmm.
On to Sunday. The first game is the Denver Broncos, an 8.5-point dog at Buffalo. Eric, I got to be honest here. I don't think Buffalo is going to lose, but I think 8.5 points, it's a lot for a defense like Denver's. When they play their ball, they have one of the top 5. They have a top 5 defense in the NFL. They have potentially the defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain, a guy who's had a career year. I feel like 8.5 with the lack of weapons on the outside that Buffalo has might load the box a little bit more. Josh Allen's going to have to do a lot in this game. I do feel like 8.5 is a lot in this spot, especially with Bo Nix. Even though he's making his first start, he's got Sean Payton. He's got a Super Bowl winning quarterback. There's nothing Sean Payton hasn't seen. And the way Bo Nix has played down the stretch here leads me to believe that 8.5 points with the Denver Broncos might be the side I roll with. And got news for you. Getting them in 14.5 points in a teaser as well. I think I might have to roll there as well. What do you think?
I definitely see the case for Denver. I lean there in the spread. It's not something I've taken. I took a 10-point teaser stupidly when I took Baltimore. I took Buffalo. Obviously going through 0, terrible bet. Don't tail that and don't do that responsibly, but I'm sending it anyway. I agree with you with the whole Bo Nix thing, right? Like, I think that the fact that he's like an old rookie for terms of his collegiate career and actually age, Sean Payton obviously helps. So I think that I'm not really scared about his performance or what it might look like. Rookie quarterbacks historically don't do well on the road in their first playoff starts, but they actually do cover at a pretty decent rate. So you can definitely expect like a poor performance. Like, even like great quarterbacks like Russell Wilson or even like Andrew Luck, like in their first playoff games, like they were shitting the bed. So does that potential exist? Yes. Mm-hmm. But the way I see this game, Johnny, and how I'm betting on Bo Nix to not see that is I took the over. I bet 46.5 over. I think these are two of the most overrated defenses in football. And I think that, like we said, Bo Nix is not going to have that initial, like, oh, I'm going to be terrible. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think Denver will be able to expose Buffalo's, very mediocre defense that's lived and died by the turnovers. And, they do well against, younger quarterbacks that aren't as good at home. That's been like kind of their staple the last couple of years in the McDermott era. But I don't think that while Bo Nix, I know, is no Jaden Daniels and is not a great quarterback, like, he's definitely good enough. And the Broncos defense, they play good competition. They get shredded. And I think Buffalo, just being Buffalo, they'll have their way with anyone. So I took 46.5. It was at DraftKings earlier. I don't know if it's still there. I don't have my odds screen up, but I'd like the over here. I like both these teams to be able to put points on the board.
I really like the theory of the over, and even against Denver's defense. What the crazy thing about Buffalo is this year? At home, they've scored 30 plus in every game except for that New England game.
Yeah,
so 30 points is definitely on the table for the Bills once again. And if that's the case, the way Bo Nix throws the deep ball, he's got weapons, he can use his legs. So I do agree with you. I think this is probably going to end up being a higher scoring game. Weather is, Denver is not afraid of the weather. They play in a very tough element with the altitude, and Denver's
supposed to be beautiful. Look, it's going to be cold but beautiful. And like you said, Denver, that's not a concern for a Broncos team.
Yeah. All right. Mid-game Sunday. Yep.
Actually, though, I was looking at that. I love Cortland Sutton touchdown.
Shut Daddy?
I love Cortland Sutton touchdown for this bad boy as well.
Yeah, I can understand it. I think, maybe because of the kind of connection he's developed, Bo Nix has with Marvin Mims. I think if I'm throwing a little sprinkle on a touchdown score, Marvin Mims at plus 260, I think is somebody that I would look at as well, because Mims, they do some creative things with him. If you've watched New Orleans, if you watch football long enough and you've watched the Saints, you saw all different kinds of speedy wide receivers Sean Payton has had over the years, whether it's Robert Meacham, whether it's Devery Henderson, or whoever finds a way to get him the ball downfield. So I think Marvin Mims is definitely a guy I would look at for the price, and this guy's been on a tear as well. Green Bay Packers, just under that Royal Mint spot at Philadelphia. The Eagles, 4.5-point favorite at home with a decent total, 45.5. I am curious. Jalen Hurts hasn't played in a month. A.J. Brown was battling some injuries. He's coming back. No worry that those guys won't play. They're going to play. But it's, what do they look like? What do they look like out of the gate? I know you have Saquon Barkley healthy. They punted on getting him the rushing record and probably the MVP for the sake of let's get this team healthy and let's avoid any injuries. My thing is this. Green Bay, especially with the loss of Jair Alexander, the fact that he won't be coming back is big. Jordan Love, I'm a fan of. I think Jordan Love can be a great quarterback in this league. You've seen the Packers rely a lot on Josh Jacobs in the running game, especially down the stretch. But the lack of overall talent at the wide receiver position, especially with Christian Watson done for the year. I mean, Jaden Reed, I'm a fan of, but he's not a wide receiver one. Octavian Wicks isn't a wide receiver one. There's not somebody, I think, in this Packers passing game that can just take over the game. Philadelphia's defense, they can be ferocious. And I feel like this is a much different game than what we saw in Brazil in week 1. This is not the same. This is a much different scenario. While I originally thought Philadelphia could be on upset alert because of what does Jalen Hurts look like with the concussion, I think I would have to lay it with Philly here. If this gets to a 5.5, I'd think about it for sure. But as of right now, 4.5 points, I think I'm taking Philadelphia to blow Green Bay away, especially when they get behind early and you take Josh Jacobs out of it. Then it makes them one-dimensional and your best skill players is neutralized. It's going to be tough for Green Bay.
So these are two teams that, want to do the same thing. They want to control the time of possession and run the football, and they want to keep their defense off the field because, yes, they play good at times, but it's not like, defense that's meant – like no defense wants to be out there for a long time, obviously, but they're not like great defenses, though, because they play how they play on offense, they make the overall talent level great. Philly's obviously an amazing defense. They're one of the number one in a bunch of metrics, but I agree with you. I think that the Eagles just do the things that the Packers are trying to do, but they do it better. Like they have a better receiving core. They have a better ground game. Saquon's better than Josh Jacobs. Their defense overall is better, and they're relatively healthy as well. So I've been adamant about the Birds being the NFC champion, since the summer, and I'm not changing course now. We've seen the ebbs and flows of their season. Yes, they've had, an easier stretch of late. They got their big, tough stretches of games early. I agree with you, Johnny. This is a much different game than what we saw in Brazil with that, higher scoring, more electric game. I think we do see a lower scoring game with both teams looking to run the football because they run the football, about half the time, if not a little bit more. It's their DNA for both of them. I think the Eagles can do those things better. So I haven't bet anything. I have future exposure on Philly, so I do have them money line for future purposes. Don't know if I'm going to deploy more, maybe again in a fun money line parlay, but give me the Birds.
Yeah. I do have a fun prop that I'm going to share in a little while. Kind of group some of my favorite props for the weekend that I've come across. So we'll save it, tease it for the end. But yeah, give me Philadelphia. I think this is a game that, especially considering all the Saquon Barkley hype or controversy of sitting him and a lot of pressure on Philadelphia. This is a game Nick Sirianni and the Eagles need to win and win convincingly, carry some momentum into the rest of the playoffs. Washington Commanders Sunday night in my second home of Tampa, Florida, against the Bucs, my preseason NFC South winner. They deliver. It took them 18 weeks, but they come home. 3-point total. No disrespect for the guy that's probably been the best quarterback in the NFC this year, which is Baker Mayfield. I know you don't believe in Tampa. I know this was or didn't. I know this was a team that you thought would regress this year. And much like the Eagles-Packers, the NFL has a cruel sense of humor. We're seeing another pair of teams that matched up in week 1. Again, much different scenario. Jayden Daniels was making his first start. He looked pretty good for a rookie in his first start. The Washington Commanders have improved immeasurably, especially on defense. They pick up Marshawn Lattimore, which is going to be another fun round 25 between him and Mike Evans. The thing is, listen, I love Jayden Daniels. I really do. I think this kid is he's the next big thing. He's the next superstar. We say that a lot about a lot of guys, but I feel like I've said it a lot this year, and we've talked about this a lot on the show. He has it. That thing you can't put your finger on. But in crunch time, when the game is on the line, there's not many quarterbacks I want more than Jayden Daniels. That said, I don't know if I like Washington to get this job done. I've liked Tampa a lot this year. I love the renaissance from Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans is a superstar. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Bucky Irving's been off the hook. The defense isn't what it was, but it can do enough. Give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I still think they're going to be able to move the ball against Washington, both on the ground and in the air. And I think they're going to be able to confuse Jayden Daniels enough to where he's not going to be able to make up the difference on offense.
Yeah, I hate that I agree. I hate that I agree. Obviously, I am a Commanders fan. JD5 is my guy. He's him. Like, he's already going to be a top, 6-7 quarterback. It's awesome. It feels great. But winning, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a good football team. That being said, I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be that team maybe like that comes out of the woodwork. Obviously, they're NFC South champ, but they're no Detroit, they're no Philly, and I don't think they're going to be like a David Goliath story and take down one of those teams, because I think they are limited with Todd Bowles. I know he's kind of gotten away with not being like really a great coach this year because they've been so fun on offense. Liam Cohen's done an amazing job. Like, Bowles focused on the defense. Of course, they've obviously done well despite injuries, though they are still susceptible to big plays, deep balls. But Washington doesn't have the weapons. They really don't. Like, JD5 is going to keep them in the game. He's not going to break his back. He's not going to shit the bed. Like, he's going to look fine. We're just not going to be able to keep up with them. And if we're ever behind the sticks, like only having Terry as a reliable weapon, like I know Eckler's back and that certainly helps, but Olamide Zaccheaus WR2 is not going to cut it against a team with the firepower like the Bucs. I bet the over when it first came out at 49.5. I know I spoke about how I was going to bet it at any number, and I already have some value, but I'm debating hedging out, Johnny. I think I'm liking, the more I think about it, the more I'm leaning toward the under in this matchup. I'm curious before I get into my thoughts if you had a lean on the total, because at first I was thinking fireworks, and I think it's still going to be a higher scoring game, but I'm kind of leaning under now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw fireworks in the first matchup, a lot of scoring, and obviously Mike Evans pants' secondary, which was still carrying the loser, worst secondary in the league from the year before, and obviously it was pre-Marshawn Lattimore. I'm interested because the first half totals at 24.5. I feel like Jayden Daniels, the nerves early, I feel like he can be a little sluggish and not as sharp early on. Wouldn't surprise me if Tampa Bay is more the same way, but I feel like this game could be a little bit slow to start. I feel like the second half is where we could see some things pick up here. So maybe the 24.5 point total to the under in the first half is where I would look at. The thing is, when you have explosive players like this, it's just obviously you don't like rooting for the under. Nobody unless they're like mentally ill likes rooting for an under. Especially when you have playmakers like this. And it's hard for me to sit there and say 50.5 is too low. I probably look for the first half. I do have a prop in this game regarding Jayden Daniels, which I will share after the recap of this Minnesota Vikings LA Rams game. Let's assume this game is not played in LA and it's played in Glendale, Arizona. The Rams have not been playing well. They found their way to clinch the NFC West, and I'll be honest, I didn't think they were going to do it. I thought there was going to be even in the third quarter of the season, I wasn't really convinced that this team was going to find a way. I mean, they had that big Thursday night weird game, no touchdown scored against the 49ers. They had a poor showing against the Jets. They didn't look great against the Cardinals. And, they set their guys last week against Seattle. But, I mean, here they are. They've won 5 of their last 6, even if they haven't looked good offensively since that Bills game where they beat them out 44-42. Matthew Stafford in the postseason is what you need to know. Sean McVay, Puka, Kupp, Kyron, a defense that has played a lot better in the second half than what they were in the first half. The Minnesota Vikings are a good story, but I don't trust Sam Darnold in a playoff game. We saw what happened. Detroit laid the blueprint last week on Sunday night. A game, by the way, I don't care if you agree or disagree, but my opinion is Dan Campbell should have clinched Coach of the Year after that. Aaron Glenn put on a clinic how you defend the Vikings offense. Pressure Sam Darnold up the middle all day, every day, early, often. That's how you neutralize this explosive Minnesota offense. If the Rams do that, then I think it could be, a convincing win for them. The Vikings defense is good. Don't get me wrong, but they can be had. The Rams offense has enough playmakers. If Matthew Stafford and the Rams offense, gets their head out of their ass and starts playing to the level that we know they can be, the secondary is going to have a tough time with this receiver room. The secondary has been burned this year. They've allowed the most catches. They've allowed the most or the second most or the third most yards to receivers. And I think as long as Matthew Stafford can stay upright and keep this pass rush off of him, I feel like it could be easy pickings for the LA Rams. I like the Rams. I like the pedigree, the postseason. We've been there, done that before. I don't trust Sam Darnold in the postseason. Give me the Rams.
I'm with you. I like the Rams as well. The reasons, I know I mentioned earlier when you took the Chargers, I took the Texans. I don't trust D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick that much, but CJ Stroud, despite the shitty season, he's still an overall good quarterback. The offensive line was giving him problems, but it's not a huge issue against a lack of a pass rush. So I think, you're talking about a guy who's been in the playoffs, won playoff games, and is a good quarterback. I'm willing to take the 3 points. Now we're talking about a PK with that reverse situation. You're giving me the Rams as an underdog with the more proven coach, though I do love Stefanski, the proven quarterback who's obviously better, and I can't trust Darnold. Vikings defense, like you said, that could be had. Rams defense that will be able to get pressure on Sam Darnold, forcing some of these errors. I'm giving this game, I entirely give the, benefit of the doubt to those two edges where I'm not doing it for Houston, LA. I am doing it for LA, Minnesota for the Rams. So I agree with you on the Rams here.
100%. And, listen, if the Rams win this game, and let's say Tampa and the Rams win, then we're going to be seeing Tampa go to Philly and the Rams go to Detroit. That's a second time this year. As usual, they played to kick off the season. They played in the postseason in Detroit last year. That was a very close game, entertaining. We shall see. But I do think the Rams are a team that is probably one of the most dangerous teams in the postseason, even though their roster isn't as good as some of these other teams. They're going to be a tough out if they play to their capability because of they've been there, done that.
Yeah, I think they win for sure.
All right, we have a couple more minutes here. Favorite props, I'm going to rattle them off. Speaking of that Rams-Vikings game, Puka Nacua, we saw the torch be passed from Cooper Kupp being the guy last year in that postseason game. When Stafford was in trouble, he wasn't going to Kupp like he used to. He was going to Puka Nacua. It's been that way ever since. Puka Nacua over 7.5 catches, laying -114. Puka's been on an absolute run. He's had, I think, 8+ targets in each of his last, 8 games. He's been ripping with catches. He's getting peppered like nobody's business. The Vikings allow the most catches to wide receivers this year. Give me Puka. In the Chargers game, Ladd McConkey, I like him over 73.5. He's another guy that's heated up. It's probably going to be Derek Stingley against Quentin Johnson for the most part. So I think Ladd McConkey working out of the slot can eat 73.5. Seems a little high, but I feel like we could see some big chunk plays for Mr. McConkey. Probably like the 5.5 catches to the over at -138. Last but not least, in the Tampa-Washington game, Jane Daniels did it early in the season. I think he could do it again, over 48.5 rushing yards. Tampa's run defense has been middle of the pack against quarterbacks this year, but against Lamar, they allowed over 50. Against Jane Daniels, I think had 88 in his first one. He's been running a lot more lately. He's been crushing this number, and I think Jane Daniels, especially as a young player making his first playoff start, is going to be doing a lot more running this time around in order just to make plays and find a way to win.
Very nice. Very, very nice. For props, I've looked more at touchdowns. I talked about some other props I like, but I'll run through the TDs I like. Parlay these as ever your heart desires. I love Derrick Henry touchdown. I love Saquon Barkley touchdown. We'll get the obvious ones out of the way. JD5 for the reason you like his rush yards, the reason why I like his rushing touchdown, and also the lack of Washington's playmakers. Vikings Rams, I agree with your Puka take, so I definitely look at Puka Nacua in a touchdown parlay. Jettas, he's just the best player on the field when it comes to the Vikings offense on the field and the Rams defense on the field. Jefferson is the best player on the field, so I like Jettas touchdown as well as Kyron, because for the obvious reason that they're going to feed him at the goal line. And Denver Bills, you can't not like Josh Allen. He's like -130, so it's tough again. If you're looking for parlay, it's the move. And then Cortland Sutton, I think. And last but not least, actually, AJ Brown, again, sticking to some like more marquee guys, but similar situation where Packers secondary is susceptible. AJ Brown's obviously the alpha on that field. I hope it's Saquon or AJ, but actually, Johnny, this just reminded me. I took a future on FanDuel right now. They have, and they have it on DraftKings too. They have playoff leaders, so players to lead a statistical category. And he's been my bread and butter all season long. I'm not going with rushing yards for Saquon because he's +95, but considering I think that the Eagles make a run, I like Saquon Barkley, most rushing touchdowns, 7.5 to 1. He's actually higher odds, or he's a longer shot than Jalen Hurts, who's 6.5 to 1, and you know how that's gone all season long. But playoff mode, I'm hoping that it becomes Barkley's season, and I'm riding my boy. He cashed me for the most rushing yards in the regular season. I'm going to take a little playoff flyer on Saquon, 7.5 to 1 rushing touchdown leader.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I saw the playoff leaders as well, and I like that there's a lot of different markets. There's like playoff triple crowns, most pass rush receiving yards. It's interesting. I might dabble in that market before the first game start, but actually you reminded me on the touchdown. You like Arthur Shelby Brown. I think I'd probably go with Devontae Smith 2 to 1. It's always a toss-up between these two, but I think especially with no Jair Alexander, the Packers are going to try and focus more on shutting A.J. Brown down, giving Devontae Smith some one-on-one looks. The Packers' secondary's actually been in the top half of the league in terms of allowing the least amount of touchdowns to receivers, but Devontae Smith has been on a heater. He's got 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. This is a guy that can win a lot of one-on-one matchups. And with so much attention with Saquon and A.J. Brown, I feel like Devontae Smith at 2 to 1 plus 200 is it's too long for a guy of his caliber who's been on a heater and who's performed in the postseason to score a touchdown.
I feel.
All right, before we get out of here, Super Bowl predictions. I know you like the Eagles. You've said it since day one. Who do they go against? Is it Philly? Is it KC? Is it Baltimore? Is it Buffalo? Who is it?
Chiefs. End of story. Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills are going to lose to the Ravens, and then the Bills are going to beat the Chiefs are going to beat the Ravens, and the Ravens are going to the Chiefs are going to beat the whichever team wins the Bills-Ravens games. I think it's going to be the Ravens. And obviously the Chiefs are going to get out of the next round. Then they're going to beat the Baltimore Ravens and the AFC chip. And then Super Bowl, if you're giving me Mahomes as a dog, I'm going to take it, even though I like the Eagles. But Philly, KC, it's been my prediction since literally July. I'm not wavering at this point in time.
And you know mine. my stance since preseason. You liked Philly. I like Detroit. Detroit over KC was my day one preseason Super Bowl prediction. I'm sticking to it. That said, I feel like we're going to get a really good Final Four here. I think it's kind of been written in the stars. Obviously not official. It's still got to come to fruition. But Philly, Detroit's been the two best teams in the NFC. It's kind of been destined for them to match up for a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. Kansas City, you know how that goes. And I do agree it's going to be the winner of Baltimore-Buffalo. I think Kansas City is going to get it done. And I think the Lions will knock down the Chiefs, prevent the three-peat. And that's that. I'm looking forward to it. I got a lot on the Lions. I got a lot with Detroit. And, we don't have the market up at the moment, but you like Philadelphia to win the Super Bowl.
No, I like the Chiefs. I have the Chiefs and the Eagles. My biggest exposure for my future is Chiefs to win the AFC parlayed with Eagles to win the NFC. So when we get to the Super Bowl, I'm betting on the Kansas City Chiefs because if they're going to be, PK. But as it currently stands, just for getting to the Super Bowl, I only care about the Eagles until the end of the NFC Championship game. Until then,
you don't have the Eagles to win the Super Bowl? You just have them?
No, I have them to make the Super Bowl. I have the Chiefs, Eagles individually and together to make the Super Bowl.
So in that sense here, if you have the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl and the Chiefs are plus what?
Yes. No, continue.
And you have the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl and they're plus 370, you could take Mahomes plus 450 right now to be the MVP. And considering Patrick Mahomes got the MVP in 2019 when Damian Williams had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's going to be pretty hard for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl and Mahomes to not get the MVP.
If only that market was available across the bridge in New York, Johnny. So I got to head over to New Jersey and take that then.
Listen, man, you got to get over here. Come get it. I mean,
sure.
Right now, my guys, we could take Jahmyr Gibbs' first touchdown in the Super Bowl right now, 13-1.
Nuts, bro.
All right, everybody. Really appreciate you tuning in to get this valuable information that is Wildcard Weekend here on Breaking Bet with Eric Pauly and myself. We hope you win your bets this weekend. Best of luck. Remember to place those futures before the week starts. And we'll see you here next week as we break down the divisional round.
Yes, sir. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.